Imagine standing in the middle of a crowded city street, horns blaring, phones buzzing, voices overlapping in a relentless chorus of noise. Now picture yourself perfectly calm, untouched by the chaos, your mind as still as a quiet lake at dawn. That's the power of Stoic silence, a practice as ancient as it is urgently relevant today. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events." Realize this, and you will find strength. In a world that never stops shouting, that strength, the ability to retreat into your own stillness, isn't just a luxury. It's a survival skill. This video isn't about tuning out life. It's about tuning into yourself. Stoicism teaches us that silence isn't empty. It's fertile ground for clarity, resilience, and unshakable focus. Think of the last time you felt overwhelmed, maybe by a flood of notifications, a heated argument, or the weight of endless decisions. What if you could step back, not with detachment, but with deliberate presence? That's the subtle art we're exploring, how to cultivate inner quiet when the world demands constant reaction. The Stoics didn't avoid noise, they mastered it. From Seneca's letters on the value of solitude to Epictetus, reminders that our judgments, not external chaos, disturb us. Their wisdom is a blueprint for modern peace. Over the next minutes, we'll uncover practices to help you pause, reflect, and respond instead of react. You'll learn how selective silence can sharpen your decisions, deepen your relationships, and even reclaim your time. This isn't about escaping life's noise. It's about discovering the quiet strength that lets you move through it unshaken. The modern world is a symphony of distractions, each ping, scroll, and breaking headline pulling us further from our center. Social media feeds flood us with curated highlight reels, news cycles amplify every crisis, and endless to-do lists leave our minds cluttered like a browser with too many tabs open. Even in moments of quiet, the echoes of unfinished tasks and unanswered messages linger. The Stoics recognized this challenge centuries ago, though their distractions were chariots in the streets rather than smartphones in our pockets. Their insight, external chaos only overwhelms us when we confuse it with what we can truly control. Epictetus drew a line in the sand. Some things are up to us and some are not. The noise of modern life, the relentless notifications, the demands for our attention falls firmly in that second category. But our response, that's where our power lies. Think of your mind as a castle. The world may bang on the gates, but you decide whether to lower the drawbridge. When was the last time you paused to ask yourself, is this noise worth letting in? Consider the ritual of Seneca, who ended each day by reflecting on what had truly served him and what had merely cluttered his mind. He called it his nightly audit, not of finances but of attention. Imagine applying that same filter to today's distractions. That viral debate online, the 11th email in your inbox, the podcast playing while you work, are they nourishing your focus or fragmenting it? The Stoics didn't preach total withdrawal from the world. Instead, they practiced intentional engagement, choosing when to listen and when to retreat into the sanctuary of their own silence. Here's a question to carry with you today. How much of the noise around you is actually yours? The world will always shout, but you get to decide which voices deserve an echo in your mind. Stoic silence isn't about muting the world, it's about mastering the volume knob of your own mind. Picture this, two people sitting in the same noisy cafe. One is distracted, irritated, constantly pulled into conversations around them. The other is immersed in a book, undisturbed, as if wearing invisible noise-canceling headphones. The difference isn't the environment, it's the inner discipline. Epictetus put it bluntly, it's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters. Stoic silence is that reaction, a deliberate choice to focus only on what deserves your attention, while letting everything else fade into background static. This isn't indifference or avoidance. Passive silence might mean scrolling past conflict or bottling up emotions. Stoic silence is active, a razor-sharp filter for your mind. Imagine a gardener tending a plot of land. Weeds will always grow, but the gardener decides which to pull and which to leave. Similarly, distractions will always arise, but Stoic silence trains you to recognize which thoughts and external stimuli are worth engaging. Marcus Aurelius practiced this daily, writing in his Meditations, "The soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts." If your mind is constantly reacting to every notification, opinion, or interruption, it takes on that chaos. But when you cultivate silence, you choose the colors. Consider the modern myth of multitasking. We praise the ability to juggle emails, meetings, and messages, but the Stoics would call this fragmentation, not productivity. Seneca warned, "To be everywhere is to be nowhere." True focus, the kind that builds mastery or deep relationships, requires silencing the noise that isn't serving you. Think of an archer drawing a bow. The crowd may cheer or gasp, but their sound doesn't determine the shot. The archer's silence, their singular focus, does. Here's the subtle shift. Stoic silence isn't about controlling the world's volume. It's about realizing you've had the mute button for your inner turmoil all along. When a coworker vents their frustration, you don't have to let it become your mental soundtrack. When a social media storm erupts, you can observe it without being swept up. This isn't cold detachment, it's the warmth of preserving your energy for what truly matters. The ancient Stoics didn't retreat to mountaintops. They lived in bustling cities, raised families, and led armies, all while carrying an unshakable quiet within. That's the art we're practicing, not escaping noise, but rendering it powerless over your peace. So the next time chaos knocks, pause. Ask yourself, is this my storm to weather, or just rain on someone else's roof? The power of Stoic silence lies in that split-second choice, the space between stimulus and response where your freedom lives. There's a hidden superpower in the space between stimulus and response, a momentary pause so brief it often goes unnoticed, yet so profound it can reshape entire conversations, decisions, and even relationships. The Stoics called this the discipline of assent, the practice of withholding immediate reaction to create room for choice. Seneca, who faced his share of provocations as Nero's advisor, wrote, "The best cure for anger is delay." Not suppression, not avoidance, but delay. That split-second pause isn't passivity, it's the ultimate act of control. Think of it as a mental airlock, a buffer between the chaos outside and your inner calm, where you decide what gets in and what doesn't. Modern life conspires against this practice. Emails demand instant replies, social media thrives on knee-jerk reactions, and even conversations unfold at the speed of a trending hashtag. But what if you treated every emotional trigger like a handshake with a stranger, something you have the right to pause before accepting? Picture a colleague's critical comment landing in your inbox. The heat rises in your chest, fingers hover over the keyboard, poised to fire back. This is the Stoic crossroads. That moment isn't just about the email, it's a test of who governs your mind, the external noise or your inner wisdom. Seneca's advice wasn't theoretical. He described physically leaving the room when anger flared, not to escape, but to disrupt the momentum of emotion. Today's equivalent might be closing a messaging app for 5 minutes or taking a walk before replying. The mechanism changes, the principle remains. Anger, frustration, even excitement, they're like waves. Ride them immediately and you'll crash, pause, and you regain your footing. Consider the last time you regretted a hasty text or an impulsive comment. Now imagine a version of that moment where you'd stepped back, breathed, and asked yourself the Stoic question, will this reaction serve my best self? Here's the twist: Stoic pause isn't just for negative emotions. Ever said yes to a project out of enthusiasm, only to realize later you'd overcommitted? Or bought something in a flash of excitement that now gathers dust? The pause is equally vital here. It's the difference between being pulled by every current and steering your own ship. Marcus Aurelius praised the power of first impressions, not the snap judgments we make, but the deliberate ones we choose after reflection. Try this today. For every reaction that feels urgent, insert an intentional delay. A deep breath before answering a provocative question, a 10-minute walk before responding to a frustrating message, even a sip of water during a heated discussion to create literal and figurative space. These tiny pauses are the training wheels for Stoic silence, not as a shield against life, but as a way to engage with it on your terms. The noise of the world will never stop. But in that sacred space between hearing and responding, you'll find something far more powerful: the quiet voice of your own discernment. Marcus Aurelius kept his wisdom in the pages of a personal journal, not in a secluded mountain retreat, but amid the chaos of ruling an empire. Picture this: the most powerful man in Rome, surrounded by advisors, petitioners, and the weight of endless decisions, yet carving out moments to sit with his thoughts and write. His meditations weren't crafted in peaceful isolation. They were born in the eye of the storm. That's the paradox of Stoic solitude. It doesn't require empty rooms or silent forests. It's the ability to create mental space even when physical space is scarce. His journals weren't just reflections, they were anchors, a way to sift through the noise of the external world and reconnect with his inner compass. You might think, I don't have time for that, or my life is too loud for silence. But here's the truth Marcus understood: solitude isn't about location. It's about attention. A crowded subway, a busy office, even a hectic household, these can all become settings for silent reflection if you shift your focus inward. His practice was disarmingly simple. He'd ask himself questions like, what am I clinging to that's not mine to control? Or, how would my best self respond to this challenge? No elaborate rituals, just a deliberate pause to untangle his mind from the world's demands. Try this for 5 minutes today. It doesn't have to be poetic or profound. Sit with your coffee before checking your phone. Stand in line at the store without reaching for your device. Use that time to ask one question: what's truly worth my energy right now? That's the essence of Aurelian solitude, not escaping the crowd, but finding yourself within it. The modern world will never stop demanding your attention. But like Marcus, you can choose when to lend it and when to reclaim the silence that fuels your clarity. Epictetus, the former slave turned philosopher, had a radical idea about conversation. Most of us do it backward. We think speaking is the power move, that our words carve our place in the world. But Epictetus flipped the script. We have 2 ears and 1 mouth, he said, so we can listen twice as much as we speak. For him, true strength wasn't in dominating discussions, but in the disciplined silence of absorbing them. Imagine a courtroom where every witness is also the judge. That's how most conversations unfold. We're so busy constructing our next sentence, defending our stance, or waiting for our turn to talk that we miss what's actually being said. Epictetus called this the tyranny of the tongue, where the urge to speak drowns out the wisdom we might have heard. Modern research calls it active listening, but the Stoics framed it as a moral duty. When you truly listen without rehearsing your rebuttal or filtering words through your biases, you honor the humanity of the speaker. Think of the last heated debate you witnessed. Chances are, each person was just waiting for the other to pause so they could insert their own views. Now contrast that with a conversation where someone looked you in the eye, nodded without interruption, and then responded to what you actually said, not what they assumed you meant. That difference, it's the gap between hearing and listening, between noise and connection. Here's the Stoic secret: listening isn't passive. It's an act of resistance against the rush to judgment. Epictetus trained his students to approach conversations like archaeologists, brushing away the dirt of their own preconceptions to uncover the artifact of another's meaning. In today's world of hot takes and sound bites, that skill is revolutionary. When a friend vents about their stressful day, do you jump to solve their problem, or do you create space for them to feel heard? When a colleague critiques your idea, do you instantly counter, or do you ask, what part of this might be true? Try this experiment today. In your next conversation, focus entirely on the other person's words as if you'll be tested on them later. Notice when your mind wanders to crafting a response and gently bring it back. Epictetus believed this practice wasn't just about social grace, it was training for life. The more you listen, the less you're rattled by misunderstandings, the deeper your relationships grow, and the clearer you see the world beyond your own assumptions. The noise of modern life isn't just decibels, it's the static of unheard voices. Stoic silence begins when you stop adding to that noise and start dissolving it, one genuine listen at a time. The storm rages outside your window, rain hammering against the glass, wind howling through the trees, but inside you sit undisturbed. This is the essence of the Stoic dichotomy of control, recognizing that while you can't stop the storm, you can always choose whether to let it storm inside you. Epictetus, who endured slavery before becoming philosophy's most practical teacher, framed it with razor clarity. Some things are within our power, while others are not. Your opinions, desires, aversions, these are yours to command. Everything else, the weather, traffic, other people's choices, they belong to the universe. The moment you confuse the two, anxiety rushes in like water through a crack. This isn't passive acceptance, it's strategic focus. Imagine two chess players. One obsesses over their opponent's moves, growing frantic with every piece taken. The other focuses solely on their own strategy, adapting calmly no matter what unfolds across the board. Who's more likely to win? Stoic silence begins when you stop shouting at the pieces you can't move and start mastering the ones you can. Consider how much mental energy we waste on hypotheticals. What if the flight is delayed? What if they don't like me? What if the market crashes? These aren't thoughts, they're mental wildfires spreading because we keep feeding them attention. Epictetus offers the antidote. It's not things that upset us, but our judgments about them. Your coworker's rude email isn't the problem. Your belief that it demands an immediate, emotional response is. The traffic jam isn't the frustration. Your insistence that the universe owes you a clear commute is. This shift in perspective isn't about suppressing emotions. It's about redirecting them toward what you can actually influence. Picture a sculptor standing before a block of marble. They don't lament its hardness. They focus on where their chisel can make contact. That's the Stoic mindset. Your judgments and actions are your chisel. Everything else is just the block. Modern life bombards us with illusions of control. We curate social media feeds, optimize morning routines, and track every metric imaginable, yet still feel at the mercy of external forces. The Stoics would ask, are you investing in the right currency? You can't control whether a client says yes, but you can control how thoroughly you prepare the pitch. You can't force a loved one to change, but you can choose how you respond to their behavior, even in extreme circumstances like Epictetus' own enslavement. He taught that our final freedom is the power to assign meaning. Chains on the body need not mean chains on the mind. Try this exercise today. Divide a sheet of paper into 2 columns. On the left, list worries occupying your mind: global events, someone's opinion of you, tomorrow's weather. On the right, identify which aspects you truly control. You'll likely find the right column startlingly small, and that's the gift. Every item on the left is a weight you've been carrying unnecessarily. The Stoic art of silence begins when you set those weights down, not because you don't care, but because you finally recognize they were never yours to lift. Noise will always surround you. The Dichotomy of Control teaches you how to stop mistaking it for your own voice. Seneca's letters to Lucilius read like a first-century guide to mental decluttering, a masterclass in stillness long before smartphones and social media turned distraction into an epidemic. In one particularly striking passage, he describes retreating to his country villa not to escape Rome's chaos, but to confront an even louder adversary, his own restless mind. You must withdraw into yourself, he advises, as often as you can. Notice the phrasing. Seneca doesn't say, escape the world, but return to yourself. That distinction matters. His stillness wasn't about avoiding noise. It was about recalibrating his inner compass so he could re-engage with clarity. Fast forward 2,000 years, and we've turned distraction into a science. Infinite scroll, autoplay videos, push notifications. Our modern world is engineered to fracture attention. Yet Seneca's remedy feels startlingly contemporary. He urged Lucilius to practice deliberate solitude, not as a permanent state, but as daily maintenance for the soul. Picture him writing by lamplight, carving out hours to reflect without interruption. Today's equivalent might seem impossible until you realize Seneca wasn't meditating in a vacuum. He wrote amid political intrigue, health struggles, and the demands of mentoring Rome's elite. His stillness wasn't found in perfect conditions, it was forged in the imperfect ones. This is where modern digital detoxes often miss the mark. They frame disconnection as a radical, occasional act, a weekend retreat, or a week-long screen fast. Seneca would call that treating symptoms, not the disease. True stillness isn't a dramatic purge. It's the daily habit of stepping back, even briefly, to remember who you are beneath the noise. Think of it like brushing your teeth. You wouldn't do it once a month for 12 straight hours. The power lies in the rhythm, not the rarity. Here's the practical shift. Designate 30 minutes each day as sacred screen-free time. Not in the exhausted haze before sleep, but in the heart of your day when the world feels most demanding. It could be the first 30 minutes after waking, a lunch break away from devices, or an evening walk without headphones. The timing matters less than the intentionality. During this window, do nothing productive by conventional standards. Sit with a cup of tea and watch sunlight move across the floor. Doodle in a notebook, stroll without a podcast filling the silence. At first, your mind might rebel like a caged animal, itchy for stimulation, convinced you're wasting time. That's precisely the point. Seneca knew this friction was the workout for your attention muscles. The modern twist, unlike Seneca's villa, your sanctuary doesn't require physical escape. It's as close as the decision to close a tab, silence a notification, or leave your phone in another room. The philosopher's real lesson wasn't about avoiding the world's noise. It was about proving you're stronger than its pull. Stillness isn't where you go to hide. It's where you return to remember what deserves your voice when you choose to speak again. Amid the clatter of chariot wheels on Rome's cobblestones, Marcus Aurelius found his stillness in something we carry with us every moment: the breath. Take refuge in this, he wrote. The present moment is all you ever have. 2,000 years later, neuroscience confirms what the Stoics knew instinctively. The breath is a physiological reset button. When stress floods your system with cortisol, a few deliberate breaths can dial it back, not by denying reality, but by creating the space to meet it with clarity. This isn't just meditation lore, it's biology. Your diaphragm connects to the vagus nerve, the body's built-in calm switch. The Stoics didn't have fMRI machines, but they understood this truth: the bridge between chaos and composure is as close as your next inhale. Think of your breath as an anchor, not the kind that weighs you down, but the kind that steadies you in turbulent waters. Picture a disagreement escalating at work, voices rising, emails flying, that familiar heat creeping up your neck. This is where Stoic breathing transforms from theory to tool. Before reacting, pause just long enough to notice 3 breaths. Feel the air cool as it enters your nostrils, the slight expansion of your ribs, the gentle release on the exhale. That tiny space, often overlooked, is where freedom lives. Marcus called it retreating into the inner citadel, not to hide from the world, but to reclaim your sovereignty over it. The beauty of this practice, its simplicity hides its depth. You don't need a quiet room or 20 spare minutes. You can do it while waiting for a traffic light to change, between bites of lunch, even mid-conversation. The ancient Greeks had a word for this, prosoch, meaning vigilant attention, not mindless repetition but conscious choice. Try it now. Inhale for 4 counts, hold for 4, exhale for 6. That extended exhale triggers the parasympathetic nervous system, telling your body the crisis can wait. The Stoics would nod in recognition. This is how you dissolve panic before it hardens into reaction. Modern life tricks us into believing multitasking is efficiency. We check messages while eating, watch videos while working, half listen while planning our responses. Stoic breathing is the antidote, a rebellion against fractured attention. When Seneca advised Lucilius to assemble and train yourself, this was the foundational drill. Not because breathwork is magical, but because it's mundane enough to be revolutionary. Anyone can debate philosophy. Far fewer can master their physiology during a tense meeting or a child's tantrum. Here's the subtle shift. Don't reserve conscious breathing for crisis. Weave it into mundane moments: tying your shoes, washing dishes, scrolling past an inflammatory comment. These become micro-drills, strengthening your ability to access stillness when stakes are high. Marcus didn't wait for battles to practice. He trained in peacetime so wisdom wouldn't desert him in war. Your breath is always there, a silent ally against the noise. The next time the world demands an instant reaction, surprise it, and yourself, by taking 1 intentional breath before answering. That pause isn't hesitation. It's the Stoic art of choosing your response instead of renting out your nervous system to every passing storm. There's a quiet power in withholding words when emotions run high, a lesson the Stoics practiced not as weakness, but as tactical strength. Musonius Rufus, the Roman philosopher who taught Epictetus, put it bluntly: only speak if your words will improve upon silence. Imagine that standard applied to every heated discussion, every impulsive retort. Most arguments aren't won by the loudest voice, but by the person who refuses to let the tension dictate their response. History remembers the leaders who mastered this art. Take Lucius Verus, co-emperor with Marcus Aurelius, who faced relentless criticism from senators eager to provoke him. Where others might have retaliated with decrees or demotions, Verus often responded with deliberate silence, not out of fear or indecision, but to deny his critics the reaction they sought. Over time, his restraint turned their barbs into background noise, revealing their pettiness without a single word of defense. This isn't passive avoidance. Stoic silence in conflict is like a judo move using the other person's momentum to expose their imbalance. When someone hurls an insult, the natural urge is to throw one back, escalating the exchange into a battle of egos. But silence, that's the unexpected pivot that leaves them stumbling. Consider a modern workplace dispute. A colleague takes credit for your idea in a meeting. The immediate reaction might be to interrupt, correct them publicly, or seethe silently while plotting revenge. The Stoic alternative: pause, let the room absorb their words. Later, in private, you might say, "I noticed you presented my proposal as your own. Help me understand why." This approach doesn't just diffuse tension, it exposes the truth without collateral damage. Musonius Rufus' advice cuts deeper when you realize silence isn't empty, it's a canvas for observation. In that space between provocation and response, you gain clarity. Is this person genuinely misguided or deliberately baiting you? Does the situation demand correction, or is it trivial enough to let go? The ancient Chinese strategist Sun Tzu would have recognized this as Stoic warfare. The supreme art of war is to subdue the enemy without fighting. Every unnecessary word in conflict is a dropped shield. Try this reframe. Next time you're drawn into an argument, treat your words like currency. Spend them only where they'll yield a return in understanding or resolution, not just the fleeting satisfaction of having the last word. The Stoics knew what modern psychology confirms: anger narrows focus, while silence expands perspective. Your greatest leverage in any conflict isn't your voice, but your ability to choose when it's truly needed. There's an old courtroom tactic where lawyers advise clients: never ask a question you don't already know the answer to. Stoic silence operates on similar wisdom. Before speaking in tension, ask yourself, will this reveal truth or just my irritation? Will it mend or fracture? If the answer isn't clear, borrow Verus' strategy. Let the silence speak until your words can do more than noise. Seneca once compared careless words to feathers scattered in the wind once released, impossible to gather back. He wrote, "Speech is the index of the mind, a reminder that every syllable we utter is evidence of our inner state." For the Stoics, conversation wasn't just exchange, it was revelation. Think of the last time you regretted a hasty comment or witnessed someone unravel their credibility with an ill-considered rant. Those moments aren't just social missteps, they're windows into how little we govern our own tongues. The ancient philosophers treated speech with the same gravity as a surgeon's scalpel, a tool that could heal or harm depending on the hand that wielded it. Modern life tempts us to confuse volume with value. Social media rewards hot takes, meetings incentivize dominating airtime, and casual chats often become competitions to be heard rather than understood. Seneca's warning cuts through this noise. Wherever there is a human being, there is an opportunity for kindness, and kindness begins with knowing when silence serves better than speech. Imagine a courtroom where every objection, every argument is measured not by its cleverness but by its necessity. That's the Stoic standard for daily dialogue. Before speaking, they'd ask, is this true? Is it necessary? Is it kind? 3 filters that, if applied today, would render half our conversations mute. Consider the weight of what goes unsaid. When a friend shares good news, do you listen fully or interrupt with your own story? In a debate, do you pause to absorb the other's point or just rehearse your counter? Epictetus trained his students to treat words like currency. If you wouldn't buy it, don't sell it. Gossip, complaints, unsolicited advice. These are the counterfeit coins of communication. They clutter mental space without enriching anyone. The discipline isn't about never speaking. It's about ensuring your words carry the density of intention. Here's a challenge. For one day, keep a mental ledger of your speech. Mark 3 categories: essentials, neutral exchanges, and noise. Essentials are words that convey vital information or genuine connection. Neutrals are functional phrases like "pass the salt" or "the meeting starts at 3." Noise, that's everything else: the idle chatter, the reflexive opinions, the words spoken just to fill silence. Most of us will find our noise columns shockingly full. The Stoics weren't advocating monastic silence, they were prescribing precision. Like a chef who knows a pinch of salt enhances a dish while a handful ruins it, they understood that restraint amplifies meaning. The next time you're about to speak, picture Seneca at your shoulder, whispering, "Is this utterance worth the breath it takes?" Because in a world drowning in words, the rarest gift isn't eloquence, it's the wisdom to sometimes withhold it. The glow of screens has become our modern campfire, a place where we gather not for warmth, but for endless distraction. Yet the Stoics would recognize this digital landscape as just another iteration of an ancient challenge: how to discern signal from noise in a world that rewards constant consumption. Imagine Seneca walking through today's app stores. He wouldn't see tools for productivity or connection first. He'd see countless opportunities to fragment attention, to trade the depth of a single thought for the shallows of infinite scrolling. Digital minimalism isn't about rejecting technology. It's about applying Stoic discipline to our devices, treating them like the philosophers treated their surroundings, as materials to be curated, not compulsions to be obeyed. Consider how Epictetus approached possessions. Wealth consists not in having great possessions, but in having few wants. Translate that to your phone. True digital wealth isn't measured in unread emails or followed accounts, but in the space you've carved for uninterrupted thought. Every notification you allow is a tiny request for your most precious resource, attention. The Stoics called this the discipline of assent, the practice of consciously choosing what deserves entry into your mental space. Apply that filter to your tech habits. That news app constantly updating political drama, the social feed that leaves you comparing your life to highlight reels. These aren't neutral tools. They're modern-day versions of the distractions Roman senators faced, just wrapped in sleek interfaces instead of togas. Here's the litmus test. After interacting with an app or platform, do you feel nourished or depleted? Marcus Aurelius journaled nightly about what served his character. We might audit our screen time with similar rigor. Take your phone's usage report and categorize each minute like a Stoic accountant. Does this activity expand my understanding, strengthen meaningful connections? Or is it merely filling time with mental popcorn, tasty in the moment, leaving no substance behind? The goal isn't austerity, but intentionality. Even the ancient Stoics enjoyed theater and poetry, but they engaged with purpose, not passive absorption. Practical steps emerge when we view apps through a Stoic lens. Begin with a single question: what essential functions does this device serve? For the Stoics, writing tablets held philosophy. For us, phones might hold maps, books, or lifelines to loved ones. Those stay. Next, identify digital taverns, places where time disappears without return. The gaming app that eats hours, the video platform that autoplays you into exhaustion, the comment sections that transform reasonable people into ranters. These are the modern equivalents of the rowdy Roman baths Seneca warned about, environments designed to overstimulate. Unlike the ancients, we carry these taverns in our pockets. The solution isn't grand gestures like month-long detoxes, but daily gates. Turn off all non-essential notifications, not just sounds, but the visual badges that hijack focus. Designate Seneca hours where your phone stays in another room, proving you're not its servant. Most radically, periodically uninstall apps, not because they're bad, but to test if life improves without them. When you reinstall, do so consciously, like a Stoic admitting only virtuous influences into their inner circle. What makes this approach uniquely Stoic rather than generic productivity advice? The underlying why, minimalism for its own sake can become another form of control-seeking. But when we prune our digital lives like a philosopher pruning unnecessary desires, we're not just creating space, we're reclaiming sovereignty over our judgments. Your locked screen can bear witness to Epictetus' most liberating truth. No thing is by its own nature distressing, it's our interpretation that makes it so. The pings, the likes, the endless scroll, they only hold the power we assent to give them. So tonight, as you charge your device, ask yourself this Stoic farewell question. Did my screens today serve the person I aspire to be, or distract me from becoming them? The answer isn't in unplugging completely, but in holding the plug with the same deliberate care. The ancients held their quills ready to write their thoughts rather than be written upon by the world's noise. Dawn was Marcus Aurelius' sanctuary, those quiet hours when even emperors could steal a moment alone with their thoughts. His morning ritual wasn't grand or elaborate. He'd rise before the palace stirred, light a single lamp, and turn inward with a simple question. What is it in me that will oppose the good today? Not a mantra, not an affirmation, but a sober reckoning with his own humanity. This is the forgotten power of morning silence, not as passive emptiness, but as active preparation. Imagine starting your day not by surrendering your attention to notifications, but by claiming it first for yourself. The Stoics understood what neuroscience now confirms. The first hour after waking sets the tone for everything that follows. Your mind is most impressionable in those early moments, like wet clay waiting to be shaped. Will you let the world mold it with breaking news and social comparisons, or will you sculpt it with intention? Here's how to build your own Stoic dawn ritual. First, resist the siren call of your phone. That glowing rectangle is a slot machine for your dopamine pull the lever first thing, and you've already handed your day's reins to algorithms. Instead, begin with what the ancients called the view from above. Sit by a window or step outside. Notice the sky's color, the temperature of the air, the way shadows fall. This isn't poetic indulgence, it's sensory grounding. Marcus wrote his meditations not in a vacuum, but by observing the world around him, the bread baking, the birds singing, the ordinary miracles we scroll past. Next, take 5 minutes for what Seneca called premeditation of evils, not pessimism, but mental inoculation. Ask yourself, what challenges might arise today? How will I meet them with wisdom? This practice isn't about predicting the future, it's about rehearsing your resilience. The third step is the most countercultural, delayed consumption. For one sacred hour, treat your mind like a clean plate. Don't let anyone else's words or agendas be the first thing you ingest. Instead, choose nourishment. Read a page of philosophy, write 3 sentences in a journal, or simply watch steam curl from your tea. The key isn't the activity itself, but the act of choosing it. Epictetus warned that we become slaves to whatever we can't resist checking, and nothing proves his point like the reflexive morning scroll. Your inbox will still exist in 60 minutes. The world's crises will still demand attention, but this hour, it's the one space where you decide what deserves to shape your mind before the noise begins. Modern life tells us productivity starts with action. The Stoics knew better. True productivity begins with stillness, the kind that lets you distinguish the urgent from the important. Picture 2 farmers at daybreak. One rushes into the field swinging his scythe wildly. The other takes 10 minutes to sharpen his blade, who accomplishes more by noon. Your morning silence is that sharpening stone. When you finally do engage with devices, you'll do so as a person who's already defined their priorities. not as one who lets tweets and headlines do it for them. Aurelius didn't journal because he had spare time. He journaled to create the clarity that made his time meaningful. Your first hour isn't a luxury, it's the foundation for everything that follows. The world will spend the rest of your day trying to speak to you. Morning silence is when you remember how to listen to yourself. As the sun dips below the horizon and the day's chaos begins to settle, there's a practice far more transformative than scrolling through the day's notifications, a ritual Seneca called his Evening Audit. Picture this, the philosopher, candle flickering in his study, revisiting the day not to judge himself harshly, but to separate the signal from the noise. His method wasn't about tallying accomplishments or dwelling on regrets. It was a disciplined excavation of attention, asking which moments had served his purpose and which had merely stolen his focus. This is Stoic journaling at its most potent, not just recording events, but refining your ability to navigate them with intention. Start with a simple prompt. What distractions pulled me away from what truly mattered today? Not to condemn yourself for wandering attention, but to recognize the patterns. Was it the compulsive email checks that fractured your concentration? The social media rabbit hole that left you more drained than informed? The pointless debate you couldn't resist joining? Seneca's genius was in framing these as thefts not of time, but of agency, each distraction a tiny surrender of your inner citadel's gates. His evening review wasn't passive recollection, it was training for tomorrow's battles. By naming today's interruptions, you're mapping the minefield for future you to cross more wisely. Next, ask, where did I respond to noise instead of choosing silence? Recall the moment your coworker vented their frustration and you absorbed it like a sponge, or when the news cycle hijacked your afternoon with outrage that changed nothing. The Stoics measured wisdom not by what we ignore, but by what we consciously decline to internalize. Your journal becomes a mirror, revealing the gap between reaction and response. Epictetus offered a brutal but liberating truth. If someone succeeds in provoking you, realize that your mind is complicit in the provocation. This isn't blame, it's empowerment. Every irritation you recorded today is a thread you can learn to stop pulling. Now, the most counterintuitive prompt. What quiet moment mattered more than I realized at the time? Maybe it was the pause you took before answering a loaded question, or the walk where you noticed cherry blossoms instead of composing emails in your head. Stoic journaling isn't just about correcting course, it's about spotting the unnoticed victories. Marcus Aurelius filled his pages with such ordinary miracles. The baker's dedication to his craft, the teamwork of ants, the way sunlight changed stone. These weren't poetic flourishes, they were exercises in anchoring attention to what nourishes rather than depletes. Your journal should hold both the distractions that shatter focus and the quiet pockets that restore it. Practical tip: keep your evening review short but potent. 3 sentences can suffice if they're honest. Seneca often wrote just a line or two, not because he had little to say, but because brevity forced clarity. The goal isn't to chronicle every hour, but to identify the hinge moments where your attention was won or lost. Over weeks, these entries will reveal your personal noise patterns, the situations, times of day, or emotional states where focus is most fragile. That's when journaling transforms from reflection to preparation. Tomorrow's distractions won't surprise you. You've already rehearsed their arrival in these pages. End with this question: if today's noise could speak, what would it have wanted from me? The answer is often unsettling. The endless notifications crave your addiction. The outrage bait seeks your anger. The trivial debates hunger for your energy. When you personify distraction, its motives become transparent and far easier to resist. Seneca's evening practice was ultimately about reclaiming identity. I examine myself daily, he wrote, to see whether I'm wearing the mask of circumstance or my true face. Your journal is where you remove that mask, one honest line at a time. The world will always whisper, shout, and cajole. These pages are where you remember the sound of your own voice. Epictetus cut through the illusion of multitasking with characteristic bluntness. If you seek truth, you will not seek victory by dishonest means, and if you seek to live well, you will not try to do everything at once. The Stoics understood what modern neuroscience now confirms. What we call multitasking is merely rapid task switching, and each switch comes at a cost. Picture a Roman scribe carefully inscribing a scroll by candlelight. His entire world narrows to the movement of quill on parchment, the forming of each letter an act of singular devotion. Compare that to today's standard work session, writing an email while half listening to a podcast, intermittently checking messages, with a browser tab full of abandoned research. We've mistaken fragmentation for productivity, sacrificing depth on the altar of perceived efficiency. The myth persists because it flatters our modern sensibilities. Being busy feels virtuous, juggling tasks appears impressive, but the Stoics measured accomplishment differently, not by how much we started, but by what we truly finished. Consider Seneca's letters, which contain some of the most lucid philosophy ever written. These weren't dashed off between meetings, they were crafted in focused solitude, often during his morning hours when his mind was freshest. He describes this practice not as luxury, but as necessity. When you have shut your doors and darkened your room, remember never to say you are alone, for you are not alone, but your mind is with you. That's the paradox of single tasking. By narrowing your external focus, you expand your internal clarity. Modern work culture celebrates the opposite approach. Open office plans, constant notifications, and the tyranny of urgent requests create an ecosystem antithetical to deep thought. The average knowledge worker switches tasks every 3 minutes, with full recovery taking nearly half an hour each time. Epictetus would recognize this not as progress, but as a sophisticated form of self-sabotage. His discipline of attention wasn't about rigid exclusion, but about recognizing that excellence requires undistracted engagement. Imagine a blacksmith trying to forge a sword while simultaneously weaving cloth and grinding grain. The result wouldn't be 3 completed tasks, it would be 3 mediocre attempts lacking the necessary sustained heat and hammer blows. The Stoic alternative, monotasking with intentionality. Start small. Choose one daily activity to perform with full presence. It could be as simple as drinking your morning coffee without glancing at your phone, or having a conversation without mentally drafting your next email. Notice how often your mind attempts to flee the present moment, not because the task is unpleasant, but because we've trained it to crave constant novelty. Marcus Aurelius meditated on this restlessness, writing, "Nowhere can a person find a quieter or more untroubled retreat than in their own mind, if only they would go there." His insight reveals the true cost of multitasking. It's not just fractured productivity, but a stolen relationship with our own thoughts. Practical application begins with redesigning your environment for focus. Turn off non-essential notifications during deep work sessions. Use physical barriers when possible, a closed door, noise-canceling headphones, or even a sign signaling uninterrupted work time. The Stoics called this setting the terms of engagement, deciding in advance what deserves your limited attention. When unavoidable interruptions occur, don't simply react. Pause long enough to ask the Stoic question, is this more important than what I'm currently giving my life to? Most distractions wither under that scrutiny. There's profound freedom in this approach. Single tasking isn't about doing less, It's about fully inhabiting what you choose to do. The ancient scribe didn't produce more scrolls than his modern counterpart, but each stroke of his pen carried the weight of complete presence. In a world that equates busyness with worth, the most radical act may be to follow Epictetus' advice. Do one thing well, then move to the next, not as a leaf blown by the wind, but as a river carving its course. Your attention isn't just a resource, it's the essence of how you experience being alive. Guard it accordingly. History offers masterclasses in the power of silence, moments when restraint spoke louder than any words could. Take the Roman general Quintus Fabius Maximus, nicknamed the Delayer, for his refusal to engage Hannibal's superior forces directly. While his advisors clamored for immediate battle, Fabius employed strategic silence, avoiding confrontation until timing favored Rome. His critics called it cowardice. History proved it wisdom. The Stoics revered such patience, recognizing that silence isn't passivity. It's the discipline of letting fools exhaust themselves while you conserve strength for the decisive moment. Consider the courtroom silence of Thurgood Marshall, the first Black Supreme Court justice. Facing racist interrogation during his confirmation hearings, he often paused 10 full seconds before answering, not out of hesitation, but to force his opponents to sit with their own bigotry. That deliberate quiet transformed tension into a mirror, revealing others' discomfort with stillness. Marshall understood what Epictetus taught. Silence is a lesson long unlearned by fools. In an era addicted to instant reactions, his pauses were acts of reclamation, proof that rhythm can be weaponized. Then there's the profound quiet of Nelson Mandela's prison years. Locked in a cell for 27 years, he turned isolation into incubation, honing his vision for reconciliation while others expected bitterness. His jailers mistook his silence for defeat, not realizing he was mastering the art of listening to his enemies' fears. The Stoics would have recognized this as the ultimate application of their principles, adversity not endured but alchemized. As Marcus Aurelius wrote during his own battles, the nearer a man comes to a calm mind, the closer he is to strength. Even in fiction, we find truth. Atticus Finch in To Kill a Mockingbird demonstrates the might of unruffled silence when facing a lynch mob. His calm refusal to match their rage deflates their aggression far faster than shouting could. This mirrors Seneca's observation. A sword never kills anybody, it is a tool in the killer's hand. Likewise, words aren't the problem, it's the emotional charge behind them. Atticus' stillness removed the killer's hand. Now apply this to your life. That colleague who needles you in meetings, hoping for a reaction, what if you met their provocation with attentive silence? Not the cold shoulder, but the warmth of refusing to play their game. The family member who thrives on drama, how might their storm dissipate if you anchor yourself in quiet observation? The Stoics called this the reserve clause, accepting what happens while reserving judgment on whether it's good or bad. Silence becomes the space where events reveal their true nature. Here's the challenge. For the next 24 hours, identify one situation where your words would normally rush in, and instead, let silence stand guard. Notice how discomfort shifts. Often, what we fear isn't the other person's reaction, but facing our own impulse to fill the void. As the Japanese proverb says, the empty vessel makes the loudest sound. Stoic silence isn't about having nothing to say, it's about proving you're no vessel to be easily rattled. The next time chaos demands your voice, ask yourself, is this my truth to speak, or merely my ego's itch to be heard? Imagine your mind as a theater stage. Thoughts, emotions, and external events flood the spotlight, some demanding immediate attention, others whispering from the wings. Now picture a single empty seat in that theater, yours. This is the essence of the Stoic pause, not stopping life's performance, but choosing when to step back into the audience and observe. Marcus Aurelius described this shift with startling simplicity. Remove the judgment, and you have removed the thought, "I am hurt." That space between what happens and how you engage with it. That's your built-in pause button. Try this now. Close your eyes and recall a recent moment of irritation, a rude comment, a traffic jam, a plan gone awry. Instead of reliving the frustration, visualize yourself floating just outside the scene, watching it unfold like a play. Notice the characters, including yourself, the dialogue, the rising action. From this vantage point, something extraordinary happens. The event remains, but its grip on you loosens. This isn't avoidance, it's what psychologists now call metacognition, the ability to think about your thinking. The Stoics mastered it 2,000 years ago. The power lies in the mechanics. When your boss sends a terse email, your body reacts before your mind catches up, shoulders tense, breath shallow, fingers itching to type a defensive reply. Here's where the pause button transforms everything. Before your hands move, whisper Marcus's reminder. This colored impression, let me test it. That tiny delay creates a buffer where choice lives. You might still respond, but now it's deliberate rather than reflexive. Like a conductor lowering their baton to quiet an orchestra. You're not silencing the music permanently, just creating space to hear each note clearly. Modern neuroscience confirms why this works. The amygdala, your brain's alarm system, processes threats in milliseconds. Your prefrontal cortex, responsible for reasoned decisions, takes nearly 10 seconds to fully engage. The Stoic pause bridges that gap. Ancient philosophers didn't have fMRI scans, but they recognized the pattern. Epictetus advised students to let the balancing weight be your first impression of the object, meaning place your initial reaction on one side of a scale and your considered judgment on the other. Only then decide which carries more weight. Turn this into a daily drill. Set 3 random phone alarms labeled pause. When they chime, freeze wherever you are. Notice what emotion is present, what thought just passed through your mind, what bodily sensations arise. Don't judge or change anything, just observe. Over time, these micro-pauses train your mind to create space even in chaos, like a dancer who learns to spot during spins to avoid dizziness. The world's noise won't stop, but you'll discover you've always had the power to turn down its volume. Marcus kept a private mantra for such moments. The obstacle becomes the way, not by magically vanishing problems, but by revealing how each disturbance is also an invitation to practice patience, to refine perspective, to exercise the muscles of your inner citadel. Your pause button isn't an escape hatch. It's the doorway to a quieter strength that has been waiting beneath the noise all along. Gratitude thrives in silence, not as a whispered thank you, but as a deep recognition of what's already present. The Stoics turned this practice into a nightly ritual, not with grand gestures, but in the quiet space between thoughts. Picture Epictetus, the philosopher born into slavery, who wrote, "He is a wise man who does not grieve for the things which he has not, but rejoices for those which he has." That rejoicing wasn't about dramatic declarations. It was the discipline of noticing. A roof overhead, clean water in a cup, the ability to read these words, things so easily overlooked in the noise of wanting more. There's neuroscience behind this ancient wisdom. When you mentally name 3 things you're grateful for each night, you're not just listing, you're rewiring. The brain's reticular activating system filters reality based on what you focus on. Dwell on lack and you'll spot scarcity everywhere. Train it on abundance and ordinary moments start shimmering. The Stoics didn't know about neural pathways, but they understood the power of selective attention. Seneca described gratitude as the soul's memory. a way to preserve life's gifts before they fade into familiarity. Try this tonight before sleep. Lie still in the dark. No journal, no phone glow, just you and the silence. Let 3 specific things surface, not broad concepts like family, but granular details. The way your child's laughter dissolves stress, the warmth of socks fresh from drying, the fact that your lungs just drew breath without your conscious effort. Epictetus would call this seeing with sober eyes, recognizing that many pleasures aren't earned, they're on loan from fortune. The magic lies in the pairing of gratitude and quiet. Alone, thankfulness can become performative, a social media post or rote dinner table recitation. But when married to stillness, it becomes revelation. Marcus Aurelius wrote his gratitude amid war and plague, noting simple marvels. The loaf of bread cracking open as it bakes, ripe figs splitting their skins. His palace held imperial treasures, yet he found wonder in perishable things. That's the Stoic secret. Gratitude isn't about tallying possessions, but peeling back the blindness of habit. Modern life tricks us into believing gratitude requires grand occasions, promotions, vacations, milestones. The Stoics practiced the opposite, finding gold in the gravel. When Epictetus advised, we should keep ready at hand the thought that all things fade, he wasn't fostering gloom, he was sharpening appreciation for what exists right now. That faint hum of electricity powering your reading light, someone in history spent a lifetime inventing it. The silence you're sitting in, a gift your ancestors might have traded years to experience amidst their harsher realities. Here's the challenge for 1 week: make your gratitude list in total silence. No writing, no speaking. Let each item resonate like a bell in your mind. Notice how absence amplifies meaning. The pillow under your head becomes softer when you truly feel it. The memory of a friend's kindness grows brighter when examined without distraction. This practice isn't about ignoring life's struggles, it's about balancing the scales of attention. As Epictetus reminds us, nothing is miserable unless you think it so, and conversely, nothing is blessed unless you choose to see it. In a world that equates volume with value, silent gratitude becomes rebellion. It's refusing to let the trivial drown out the essential, those 3 quiet moments before sleep. They're not just reflection, they're reclamation. The Stoics knew what we often forget. What you appreciate appreciates. The more you notice, the richer your world becomes, even if everything else stays the same. Complaints are the static of modern life, background noise we've learned to tolerate, even mistake for conversation. But the Stoics heard something more sinister in this hum, the slow erosion of agency. Marcus Aurelius, who ruled Rome through plague and war, wrote in his private journal, "The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way." That radical refrain turns every complaint into a hidden invitation not to vent, but to act. Picture 2 co-workers facing the same broken printer. One sighs, "This always happens to me," while the other thinks, "This is my chance to practice patience or find the IT manual." Both experience the same event, only one remains enslaved by it. The ancient philosophers reserved special disdain for idle grumbling. Epictetus, born into slavery, had zero patience for those who cursed fate while doing nothing to improve their circumstances. His teaching was blunt: don't explain your philosophy, embody it. Every complaint, he argued, is a confession, a revelation of where we've handed our power over to external forces. When we moan about traffic, we're admitting we expected the universe to arrange our commute. When we grouse about rude people, we're showing we've staked our peace on strangers' behavior. The Stoic alternative isn't bottling up frustration, but transmuting it. That frustrating delay, training for patience, the incompetent colleague, a mirror showing where you might improve your own communication. Modern psychology confirms this ancient wisdom. Studies on vent sessions reveal a counterintuitive truth. Supposedly cathartic complaining often reinforces negativity by strengthening neural pathways of resentment. Like scratching a mosquito bite, it brings momentary relief at the cost of prolonged irritation. The Stoics anticipated this by 20 centuries. Seneca warned that habitual complainers become architects of their own misery, constructing mental prisons where every minor inconvenience feels like a personal affront. His solution, the premeditatio malorum, purposefully envisioning life's inevitable frictions so they lose their power to surprise. Imagine preparing for a hike by studying the trail map's steep sections beforehand. The climb doesn't change, but your readiness transforms the experience. Here's the challenge: try a 24-hour complaint fast, not just avoiding verbal gripes, but eliminating internal ones too. When you catch yourself thinking, "This weather ruined my plans," pause. Could you reframe it as, "This weather demands creative adaptation"? The rules are simple. If something bothers you, either take constructive action or accept it with equanimity. No passive whining allowed. You'll quickly discover how much mental space was occupied by petty grievances and how liberating it feels to reclaim that territory. Expect resistance. The first hours might feel like quitting caffeine, withdrawal headaches of the soul as your mind rebels against its new constraints. That's the point. Each resisted complaint is a rep for your focus muscles. Marcus Aurelius faced far harsher trials, betrayals, illness, the weight of empire, yet his meditations reveal a man meticulously pruning his own complaints before they could take root. You have power over your mind, he reminded himself, not outside events. The payoff transcends personal peace. Complaints are contagious, so is Stoic resolve. Notice how one person's bad mood can infect a whole office, while one calm presence can anchor a chaotic room. Your silence in the face of minor frustrations isn't acquiescence, it's leadership by example. Epictetus saw this clearly. If you want to improve, be content to be thought foolish and dull regarding external things. Let others obsess over the thermostat wars or the coffee machine queue. Your attention is reserved for what truly shapes your life, your judgments and actions. Tonight, when you review your day, don't just tally what went wrong. Ask Marcus' question: what did I make of these obstacles? The printer jam wasn't the test, your response to it was. The traffic didn't define your day, your thoughts about it did. Every irritation that arises tomorrow is another chance to practice this alchemy, not pretending difficulties don't exist, but proving they don't own you. The world will always give you reasons to complain. Stoic silence is how you reclaim your right to something better, progress. Seneca once warned, "A hasty decision is the mother of regret." He wrote those words not as abstract advice, but as a man who'd witnessed the wreckage of impulsive choices, emperors toppling alliances in fits of anger, merchants gambling fortunes on whims, friends severing ties over unconsidered words. The Stoics didn't just value deliberation, they built entire philosophies around the space between thought and action. Picture Seneca at his writing desk, pausing mid-sentence to let ink dry before committing to the next word. That tangible patience wasn't just about crafting elegant prose, it was training for life's critical moments. Modern neuroscience now confirms what these ancient philosophers practiced. When we allow silence to cushion our decisions, the prefrontal cortex, the brain's reasoning center, gains precious seconds to override the amygdala's primal reactions. Consider two travelers at a crossroads. One rushes down the nearest path without checking the sun's position or consulting their map. The other sits on a stone, studying shadows and wind patterns before choosing. Both may reach their destination, but the second traveler arrives with fewer blisters and broken sandals. This is the essence of Stoic deliberation, recognizing that every choice, from replying to a provocative email to making career pivots, benefits from what Marcus Aurelius called the clarifying pause. The Romans had a saying, festina lent, make haste slowly, not contradiction but wisdom. Speed without direction is just motion masquerading as progress. Now contrast this with today's decision-making landscape. Social media platforms reward snap judgments with likes and shares. News cycles thrive on knee-jerk reactions. Even mundane choices, what to watch, eat, or buy, come preloaded with algorithms nudging us toward instant gratification. The average person makes around 35,000 decisions daily, most unconsciously. We've outsourced deliberation to autopilot, then wonder why our lives feel like ships battered by storms we never saw coming. Seneca saw this coming 2 millennia ago. The greatest obstacle to living is expectancy, which hangs upon tomorrow and loses today. His solution, morning and evening rituals of quiet reflection, not to escape decisions, but to meet them with eyes wide open. Practical application begins with restructuring decision triggers. Next time your phone buzzes with an urgent message, resist the dopamine-driven grab. Let it sit while you take 3 intentional breaths. Before accepting meeting invites, ask Seneca's twin questions. Is this necessary? And what will I sacrifice to attend? Financial decisions gain similar clarity when subjected to the Stoic view from above, imagining how the choice will feel in 6 months, not 6 minutes. Even something as simple as meal planning transforms when you pause to consider not just what you crave now, but what your future self will thank you for. The true test comes in high-stakes moments. Ancient leaders like Cato the Younger would literally walk away from heated debates, physically creating space to prevent emotion from hijacking judgment. Modern equivalents might look like scripting a difficult email, then saving it as a draft overnight, or adopting the 10-minute rule for major purchases. If it still feels right after a brief waiting period, proceed. What seems like delay is actually depth mining, separating fleeting impulses from enduring values. Here's the paradox the Stoics uncovered. Decisions made in silence often speak loudest over time. That promotion you didn't take because it conflicted with family values, the argument you diffused with patience instead of pride, the investment you passed on because the numbers didn't align with your principles. These quiet choices compound like interest in the bank of character. As Epictetus observed, no great thing is created suddenly, any more than a bunch of grapes or a fig. If you tell me you desire a fig, I answer that there must be time. Let it first blossom, then bear fruit, then ripen. Your most consequential decisions deserve that same seasonal respect, the silence to blossom before bearing weight. Your social media feed is a banquet where every dish is designed to hijack your attention. Spicy outrage, sugary gossip, artificially inflated drama. The Stoics would recognize this feast for what it is, a test of discernment. Epictetus offered a litmus test 2,000 years before algorithms existed. If a person gave your body to any stranger they met, you'd be furious. Yet you hand over your mind to anyone who insults you, allowing it to be troubled and disturbed. Each scroll, each click, is a quiet transaction where you trade fragments of your attention for whatever the digital marketplace offers. But what if you became the gatekeeper of that exchange? Start with Seneca's question. Does this nourish or diminish me? Not every account you follow needs to be educational or profound. Even the Stoics enjoyed theater and games, but each should pass the integrity test. That influencer who leaves you restless with comparisons, the news source that amplifies anger without solutions, the debate threads where everyone shouts and no one listens, these aren't neutral content. They're weights tied to your focus. Unfollowing isn't avoidance, It's the ancient discipline of assent applied to pixels. When you curate your feed like a Stoic curator pruning a garden, you're not hiding from reality. You're selecting which seeds get to take root in your mental soil. Consider the practice of Marcus Aurelius, who began each day by envisioning the types of people he'd encounter: the boastful, the ungrateful, the rude. This wasn't pessimism, it was immunization. Apply that same clarity to your online world. Before opening an app, pause to name the emotional aftertaste you're willing to accept. Twitter might leave a metallic tang of agitation, while a philosophy podcast leaves you with the clean finish of reflection. The key isn't eliminating all discomfort. Growth often lies there, but distinguishing between productive friction and soul-sapping noise. Practical steps emerge when you treat your feed like a Stoic training ground. Try this for 1 week. Keep a post-interaction journal. Note how you feel after engaging with specific accounts, not just in the moment but 15 minutes later. That travel photographer inspiring wanderlust. Keep. The colleague whose political rants hijack your morning calm. Mute. The Stoics didn't advocate blanket rejection of external input. They practiced intentional receptivity. Your unfollow button is modern-day triage, separating what heals from what only wounds. The deeper insight lies in recognizing that every piece of content is a teacher, whether you consent to the lesson or not. That viral outrage thread teaches you to see people as caricatures. The Serene Nature account trains your eye to spot beauty in mundane moments. Epictetus warned, "You become what you give your attention to." In an age where attention is currency, your follow list isn't just preference, it's destiny. There's profound freedom in this approach. Unlike the Stoics, we carry our agora in our pockets, an endless marketplace of ideas clamoring for our coins of concentration. But the philosopher's question remains unchanged. Are you spending your wealth on trinkets or treasures? When you next reach for your phone, hear Seneca's whisper. No good thing renders its possessor happy unless their mind is reconciled to the possibility of loss. Every account you follow is a temporary guest in your mind. Choose ones worthy of the privilege. Epictetus drops a truth bomb that still echoes across centuries. When someone speaks badly of you, it's not you who's harmed, but them, provided you don't let it get under your skin. That last clause holds the key to Stoic silence in the face of human imperfection. Picture this: your neighbor parks haphazardly, stealing part of your driveway. Your initial reaction might be to label them inconsiderate or entitled. But the Stoics propose a radical alternative: observation without verdict. Not because you're naive, but because you recognize that their actions reveal their character, not yours. Marcus Aurelius practiced this daily as emperor, facing senators who lied to his face and generals who undermined his authority. His journal reveals the mental shift. When you wake up in the morning, tell yourself, the people I deal with today will be meddling, ungrateful, arrogant, dishonest, jealous, and surly. Notice what's missing, any suggestion they should change. He prepared to meet them as they were, not as he wished them to be. This isn't resignation, it's liberation. When you stop expecting others to match your standards, you free yourself from the exhaustion of constant judgment. Here's how to train this muscle. Next time someone cuts you off in traffic, resist the instinct to narrate their moral failings. Instead, adopt what psychologists now call descriptive observation. That blue truck merged aggressively, full stop, no adjectives about the driver's worth. Epictetus frames it as ownership. You're not hurt by the event, but by your judgment about the event. That tailgater didn't create your frustration, your belief that drivers should behave a certain way did. The magic happens when you realize non-judgmental observation isn't passive, it's strategic. Imagine two co-workers gossiping nearby. The judgmental mind gets hooked. They're so unprofessional. The Stoic mind stays detached. They're exchanging personal opinions during work hours. Suddenly, you're no longer emotionally invested in their behavior. You've created what the Buddhists call the sacred pause, a space between stimulus and response where your sovereignty lives. Try this experiment for a day. Carry a small notebook and tally how often you mentally judge others, their clothes, parenting, politics, driving. Most people shock themselves at the volume. Each unchecked judgment is like drinking poison and waiting for the other person to get sick. The Stoic alternative. Seneca's razor, we suffer more in imagination than in reality. That colleague who takes credit for your ideas isn't causing your pain. Your belief that fairness must prevail is. There's profound power in this reframe. When you stop labeling others, you start seeing them as mirrors. That impatient customer, a reminder to cultivate patience in yourself. The boastful relative, an invitation to examine your own need for validation. Even Epictetus' harshest critics became his teachers. The fool who knows he's a fool is that much wiser. Practical application begins with small resistances. When your partner leaves dishes in the sink, notice the story you tell yourself. They don't respect me, versus the observable fact, there are unwashed bowls. One version drags you into conflict, the other leaves room for curiosity. Maybe they're overwhelmed, perhaps they didn't notice, or it could simply be that dishes aren't their priority. The truth is irrelevant. What matters is that your peace no longer hinges on their behavior. This isn't about becoming a doormat. Stoics drew clear boundaries, they just did so from calm rather than outrage. When Cato the Younger witnessed corruption, he didn't waste energy condemning the corrupt. He simply lived with such integrity that their actions stood in stark relief. Your silent non-judgment can have the same effect. That friend who always cancels plans, instead of labeling them flaky, adjust your expectations. Invite them to group outings where their absence doesn't derail you. Protect your peace without demanding they change. In the end, Epictetus' wisdom cuts to the core. If someone handed you a gift and you refused it, who does it belong to? Apply that to insults, slights, and annoyances. The person tossing the garbage of their behavior is only polluted if you accept the delivery. Your silence isn't weakness, it's the ultimate filter, letting through only what serves your growth. The world will never run out of flaws to judge. Stoicism offers something better, the quiet triumph of no longer needing to. The glow of screens has invaded our final sanctuary, the precious hours before sleep, where ancient wisdom once prescribed stillness as the bridge to true rest. Seneca, who suffered chronic insomnia amidst Rome's political intrigues, prescribed a ritual that modern science now validates. Dismiss your troubles not with a whip, he advised Lucilius, but with a gathering of your thoughts. His nightly wind down wasn't about exhaustion leading to collapse, but conscious transition, replacing the day's mental clutter with deliberate reflection. Picture him in his lamplit study, reviewing correspondence not to react, but to distill wisdom, jotting notes not as tasks for tomorrow, but as markers of progress. This wasn't journaling for productivity. It was philosophy as a sleep aid, unbraiding the mind's knot so slumber could arrive unburdened. Modern sleep research reveals why this works. The blue light from devices suppresses melatonin, but the deeper theft is cognitive. Scrolling through news or emails before bed leaves your brain whirring with unresolved threads, what psychologists call attention residue. The Stoics anticipated this with their concept of evening retrospection, a practice more nuanced than mere gratitude lists. Seneca would examine his day like a jeweler inspecting gems, which interactions aligned with his values. Where had he reacted rather than responded? This wasn't self-judgment, but calibration quieting the mental static that otherwise echoes through the night. Practical application starts with reclaiming the last hour before sleep as sacred buffer zone. Begin by reframing the goal. It's not about falling asleep faster, but arriving at sleep differently. Replace the smartphone's glow with soft lamplight, trading headlines for highlighting a single passage of philosophy or poetry. The content matters. Choose words that deepen rather than excite. Marcus Aurelius' meditations weren't meant for scholarly study. They were personal reminders composed in the quiet hours, designed to settle the soul. Try reading one paragraph aloud, then sitting with eyes closed to let its meaning resonate. This creates what neuroscientists call a cognitive off-ramp, a structured transition from wakefulness to rest. The physical environment plays a supporting role. Seneca extolled the virtues of simple bedding, not as austerity, but to remove sensory distractions. Modern equivalents might include blackout curtains, white noise machines, or the deliberate removal of clocks. Time checking fuels insomnia's anxiety. But the true transformation happens in mindset. Ancient Stoics viewed sleep as rehearsal for death, not morbidly, but to highlight its sacred neutrality. Epictetus advised students to whisper as they lay down, "I surrender to the rhythm of life," releasing the illusion that vigilance alone keeps the world turning. For those who protest, "I don't have time," consider the math. Losing 30 minutes of sleep to scrolling often costs hours of restless tossing. The Stoic wind down isn't an addition to your day, it's the subtraction of what sabotages rest. Start small. 10 minutes of handwritten reflection. Studies show handwriting engages the brain differently than typing. 5 minutes of focused breathing while visualizing the day's positive moments, then darkness. Track not just how quickly you fall asleep, but the quality of your waking. The deeper gift of Stoic sleep hygiene reveals itself over time. Nights become a training ground for daytime resilience. When you practice releasing control each evening, trusting the world will persist without your constant input, you cultivate the same detachment toward daytime stressors. Seneca's letters reveal this connection. How much better to heal at night what the day has wounded. Your pillow, then, isn't just a place to rest, it's the plinth where you sculpt a mind unshaken by life's noise. The dawn will come regardless. Stoic silence ensures you meet it renewed rather than ravaged. There's a peculiar weight we carry without realizing it, the accumulation of past missteps and future uncertainties, piled like stones in a mental backpack. Marcus Aurelius, the philosopher-emperor who ruled Rome through plague and war, offered a startlingly simple remedy: give yourself a gift, the present moment. Not as a motivational platitude, but as a radical act of release. Picture standing by a riverbank, watching leaves float past. Each leaf represents a regret, the harsh words you wish you could retract, the opportunity you let slip. Now imagine opening your hands and letting those leaves drift away, not because they don't matter, but because clinging to them changes nothing except the heaviness of your own spirit. The Stoics called this apatheia, not apathy, but freedom from the tyranny of unfixable things. Seneca, who faced exile and betrayal, wrote letters about the futility of chaining yourself to past disasters. His insight: regret is just passion directed backward, an emotion that pretends to be productive but only drains the energy you could pour into the now. Think of the last time you replayed an old embarrassment while brushing your teeth, or lost sleep over a future meeting that never unfolded as feared. Those moments weren't just passing thoughts, they were tiny thefts of your present, distractions you paid for with the only currency that truly exists: your attention. Here's how to practice this release. Close your eyes and visualize your mind as a storeroom. On one shelf are jars labeled past are filled with conversations you wish had gone differently, decisions that haunt you. On another jars-marked future, worries about health, money, relationships. The Stoic exercise: take down one jar at a time. Examine its contents not with judgment but curiosity. Ask Marcus' question, can I change this now? If the answer is no, imagine placing the jar outside the storeroom door, not smashing it in frustration. That's just another form of attachment, but gently setting it aside to make space for what you can influence. Modern psychology echoes this ancient wisdom. Rumination, the obsessive replaying of past events, activates the same neural pathways as depression. Catastrophizing, imagining worst-case futures, triggers identical stress responses as real threats. The Stoics anticipated this by 2 millennia. Epictetus, born into slavery, framed it as a matter of ownership. What upsets people is not things themselves, but their judgments about these things. That argument with your partner last week, it's over. The anxiety about an upcoming presentation, it hasn't happened. The pain comes from where you've chosen to station your mind in territories either abandoned or not yet reached. Try this tactile ritual. Write down one regret and one worry on separate slips of paper. Hold them in your palm and feel their weight not as paper, but as the mental energy they've consumed. Now light a candle or imagine one and let the papers burn. Watch as the edges curl, the words dissolving into smoke. This isn't magical thinking, it's sensory reinforcement of a mental shift. The past and future only exist as neural pathways, patterns you strengthen or weaken through attention. As the ashes cool, hear Epictetus' reminder, you are not your thoughts. You are the observer behind them. The freedom lies in recognizing that letting go isn't passive surrender, it's active redirection. When Marcus wrote, confine yourself to the present, he wasn't denying life's complexities. He was mapping the only terrain where agency exists. That project you failed last year, its value lies not in endless self-reproach, but in the skills you've honed since. The uncertain medical test results, worrying won't alter them, but preparing questions for your doctor might. Stoic release isn't about erasing history or ignoring tomorrow. It's about reclaiming your footing in the only moment where action is possible, the breath you're taking right now. Tonight, as you lie in bed, conduct this audit. Notice where your mind wanders, to yesterday's stumbles or tomorrow's specters. Then whisper Marcus' mantra, this instant is all I own. Not as denial, but as liberation. The leaves will keep floating down the river. Your power lies in choosing which ones to let pass unburdened by your grasp. History remembers the loudest voices but often follows the quietest leaders. Consider the striking contrast between 2 Roman emperors, Nero, whose theatrical outbursts and erratic proclamations left Rome in flames, and Marcus Aurelius, who ruled with such steady deliberation that his personal journal became a timeless guide to wisdom. The Stoics understood what modern leadership studies now confirm. True authority isn't seized through volume, but cultivated through presence. When a general rides ahead of his troops shouting commands, he creates followers. When he walks silently among them, observing and listening, he builds an army. Quiet leadership operates on a paradox. The less you assert your power, the more it grows. Epictetus, though never a ruler himself, trained Rome's elite in this art. His lesson was counterintuitive. If you wish to be respected, first stop demanding respect. Imagine a manager who solves every team conflict by imposing solutions versus one who asks, what do you think we should do? The first creates dependency, the second fosters ownership. Stoic silence in leadership isn't about withholding guidance. It's about creating space for others to discover their own competence. The legendary conductor Arturo Toscanini embodied this. During rehearsals, he'd sometimes lower his baton completely, letting the orchestra play without direction. Those unconducted moments revealed where musicians truly needed his input and where they'd internalized the music enough to soar alone. Modern workplaces often mistake charisma for capability, favoring leaders who dominate meetings with bold proclamations. But research on Level 5 leadership reveals a different truth. The most effective executives blend fierce resolve with personal humility. They speak last in discussions, ensuring diverse voices shape decisions. They absorb criticism without defensiveness, knowing ego is the enemy of growth. This isn't passive management, it's strategic silence. When Satya Nadella took over Microsoft, he began by listening for months before making major moves. That restraint allowed him to identify cultural fractures mere efficiency metrics would have missed. The Stoic leader's toolkit contains 3 silent superpowers. First, the pause, deliberately waiting 3 breaths before responding in tense situations, signaling control rather than reaction. Second, the question, replacing directives with inquiries like, "Walk me through your thought process," which develop critical thinking in teams. Third, the omission, knowing when not to speak at all, as Cato the Younger demonstrated when rivals provoked him. His silence wasn't weakness, it denied them the spectacle they craved. Contrast this with modern leaders who tweet impulsively, each unchecked word diluting their influence. Your leadership arena might not involve empires or corporate boards, but the principle transcends scale. A parent's quiet consistency teaches children self-discipline more effectively than explosive lectures. A teacher's calm presence settles a classroom faster than raised voices. Even in social circles, the person who listens deeply often wields more subtle influence than the constant storyteller. The test is simple. After interacting with someone, do you feel energized or drained? Heard or overshadowed, Stoic leaders leave people feeling the former, their silence acting as fertile ground where others' ideas take root. So tonight, reflect on your spheres of influence: professional, personal, communal. Where might speaking less create more impact, not by shrinking from necessary conversations, but by discerning which words truly serve and which merely fill air? The marketplace will always reward flashy performative leadership. The Stoics offer a quieter alternative, influence that endures because it wasn't forced, authority that resonates because it was never demanded. Stoic silence isn't a destination you reach, it's a muscle you strengthen over a lifetime. Epictetus, the philosopher who compared wisdom to building a house, put it bluntly: no great thing is created suddenly. You wouldn't expect to lift a heavy weight with untrained arms or play a symphony on first picking up a violin. Yet we often approach inner stillness with unreasonable expectations, frustrated when our minds wander during meditation or when we snap at a rude comment after a long day. The Stoics measured progress differently. For them, mastery wasn't about flawless execution, but about recognizing slip-ups faster and recovering more gracefully each time. Imagine 2 people practicing archery. One berates themselves for every missed shot. The other notes the wind's direction, adjusts their grip, and draws again. Both are building skill, but only one is doing it sustainably. This long-game perspective changes everything. Consider the novice meditator who judges themselves for having too many thoughts. The seasoned practitioner knows the magic isn't in eliminating distractions, but in noticing them sooner, shortening the gap between wandering and returning to focus. Marcus Aurelius, despite his imperial power, wrote frankly in his journals about recurring struggles with anger and pride. His wisdom lay not in eradicating these impulses, but in spotting their arrival and choosing not to let them steer. Modern research on habit formation echoes this ancient insight. The people who succeed aren't those with superhuman willpower, but those who design systems for gradual improvement. A single moment of silence won't transform you. 100 moments practiced consistently will. Start small, small enough that resistance can't find footholds. Instead of vowing to meditate for 30 minutes daily, begin with 3 intentional breaths before checking your phone in the morning. Rather than swearing off social media entirely, try a silent scroll experiment for 1 week. Observe posts without commenting or reacting. These micro-practices serve 2 purposes. First, they prove that stillness isn't about grand gestures but momentary awareness. Second, they create what psychologists call small wins, tiny victories that build confidence for larger challenges. Seneca nurtured his philosophy in stolen moments, writing letters during carriage rides and between official duties. His brilliance wasn't born from uninterrupted solitude, but from using life's interstices for reflection. Track progress backward, not forward. Most of us measure growth by how far we still have to go. The days we failed to stay composed, the times noise still rattled us. Flip the script. At week's end, ask, did I pause 1 extra second before reacting to bad news? Did I notice 1 unnecessary complaint before speaking it? These barely visible shifts are the seeds of mastery. Epictetus told his students, if you would be a wrestler, observe both your instructor's techniques and what happens when he's caught off guard. Apply that to your practice. When you lose your temper, investigate what triggered it without self-condemnation. That analysis isn't failure, it's data for your next attempt. The modern world sells quick fixes, 7-day detoxes, 30-second life hacks, apps promising instant calm. The Stoics offer something far more durable, a framework for lifelong refinement. Picture a blacksmith's forge. The iron doesn't transform in a single strike, but through repeated heating, hammering, and cooling. Your capacity for silence develops the same way, not by shaming yourself for being bad at it, but by showing up daily to shape the raw material of your attention. Every time you catch yourself reaching for your phone to avoid boredom, every deep breath taken during frustration, every conscious decision to listen instead of interrupt, these are hammer strikes tempering your focus. There's profound relief in this approach. You're not falling short by needing to practice, you're human. The Roman poet Horace, influenced by Stoicism, captured this beautifully. Adversity has the effect of eliciting talents which in prosperous circumstances would have lain dormant. Your moments of noise, the snapped reply, the distracted afternoon aren't proof you're failing. They're the necessary friction that sharpens your skill. The goal isn't to become someone who never experiences chaos, but someone who navigates it with increasing grace. 20 centuries ago, a former slave named Epictetus taught that freedom is found not in controlling life's storms, but in mastering how we stand within them. That lesson still holds. Your progress isn't measured by the absence of turbulence, but by the strength of your roots in the quiet beneath it. Imagine standing at the edge of a bustling city, square hundreds of voices, notifications, and distractions swirling around you. Now picture yourself stepping back just a few feet into the quiet alcove of a doorway. The noise doesn't disappear, but suddenly you're no longer drowning in it. That's the essence of Stoic silence, not the absence of sound, but the conscious choice to create space between yourself and the chaos. Over the course of this journey, we've explored how ancient wisdom meets modern urgency, how practices forged in Roman courtyards and battlefield tents can help us navigate today's relentless noise. At its core, Stoic silence is about reclaiming sovereignty over your attention. It's the pause before reacting to a provoking email, the decision to close a browser tab filled with outrage, the deep breath taken when frustration rises. These might seem like small acts, but they're revolutionary in a world that profits from your distraction. Marcus Aurelius called this the Inner Citadel, a fortress of calm no external storm can breach. But here's the secret: that citadel isn't built in a day. It's constructed brick by brick through daily practices. Let's revisit the most transformative ones. First, the power of the pause. That split-second gap between stimulus and response is where your freedom lies. Whether it's counting 3 breaths before speaking in a heated moment or leaving a message unanswered for 10 minutes to gather clarity, these pauses are the scaffolding of self-mastery. Next, the art of filtering inputs. Just as a gardener weeds their plot to let flowers thrive, you have the right and the responsibility to curate what enters your mind. Unfollow accounts that leave you restless. Silence notifications that fracture your focus. Remember Seneca's question: does this nourish or diminish me? Finally, the practice of mindful reflection. Whether it's morning journaling or an evening audit of your attention, these moments of stillness are where noise transforms into wisdom. Marcus Aurelius left us a final reminder: nowhere can a man find a quieter or more untroubled retreat than in his own soul. That retreat isn't a luxury, it's the birthplace of clarity, resilience, and purposeful action. But here's the challenge: knowledge only becomes power when applied. So today, choose just one of these practices to begin. Maybe it's designating the first 30 minutes of your day as screen-free. Perhaps it's keeping a tally of complaints you refuse to voice, or it could be as simple as pausing to feel your breath 3 times before lunch. The noise of the world will never stop. But you can always choose to stop letting it define you. If this journey into Stoic silence has resonated with you, consider subscribing for more timeless wisdom. Together, let's continue building inner citadels, one quiet moment at a